just turned 34 yesterday, and Daniel turns in 2 weeks 32. So that tells me that 32 years ago, we moved from here to the west end of Richmond. And so that kind of gives me an idea when it was, because Daniel was just very young, just born, and we moved to the west end of Richmond and then on to Winchester after that. And so my wife taught in the school that was here. I saw one of the students as we came in that had been one of her students at the time. And that's always neat to see people. Now they have their own children, right? And that's kind of neat to see. And then through the years, we actually borrowed books from the old school and used those and taught our own kids. And then we brought those back, of course, after we got done using them. So we didn't keep them. But and then through the years, we have popped in. And now that we live just about a half hour away, we see you once in a while. Things happen, and we see you in the area. Genesis chapter 14, if you haven't turned there already, Genesis chapter 14, we're looking at the rescue, and there's a lot of names in this one. And so I thought, well, instead of calling on one of the deacons as I normally do to read, I thought I better read some of this because some of the words are a little bit tougher than others. So I'll mess them up so they don't have to, okay? This chapter could be an action movie, okay? So we've got all kinds of things happening here in this action movie. We have villains, we have a crisis, we have a hero, we have strategy, we have swords, we have acts of heroism, and there's a twist, and there's a little bit of plot development going on as we go through this chapter tonight. And by the time the crisis is over, we kind of know these people. We know their motivations. We appreciate them for who they are and their potential for good. We grieve at the flaws of some of the people here. We admire the greatness of others. But most importantly, we learn some great truths. Now, if I remember right, I just swipe. There it is. I'm going to read verses 1 through 12. It came to pass in the days of Amphriel, the king of Shinar, Arioch, the king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of the nations, that they made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemneber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Beta, that is Zoar. All these joined together in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and attacked the Rephaim in Asheroth Karnaim, the Zuzium in Ham, and Eman and Shavath Kerathaim, and the Horites in their mountain of Seir as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. Then they turned back and came to in Mishpah, that is Kadesh, and attacked all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites who dwell in Hazeron Tamar. And the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Beta, that is Zoar, went out and joined together in battle in the valley of Siddim against Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of the nations, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of asphalt pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains. Then they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. We do not know how long it was since Abram has departed from Lot. It could have been a few months. It could have been a few years. I'm kind of leaning towards the longer period. It's time enough that Abram's company of servants now number 318 fighting men. Many of these people had families of their own. Verse 14 later will tell us that many were born in his house. I don't think that necessarily means that every one of these 318 were born there in his house, but a lot of people were being born of these families. And these people had not been purchased, but they're servants by choice. They're not involuntary slaves. They're there working with Abram. Now, why would that be? Well, there's no national government. There's no army. So people often looked for safety in numbers. And so it would be very common for people to gather together in a group so they could help each other out. Sometimes you would align yourself with a city, a powerful man, a powerful group, and sometimes maybe somebody like Abram. It's a business arrangement. They protect you, you protect them, and you're loyal to each other. Out there in the world, though, were men who grew more and more powerful as they took others' possessions as their own. Killing anybody who didn't serve their purposes, maybe even enslaving others, free citizens would pay them. We might call that protection money. They might call it taxes. And they joined their king in warfare, or else they might become slaves themselves. And so that's kind of the world that we're in right there. And so while Abram lived in peace, there was a coalition of kings to the east led by Chedorlaomer, and we're going to call him Big C because it's hard to say his name, okay? So Big C is in charge. And they began raiding Canaan. And for dozens of years, the city of Canaan had served Big C, paying their taxes and being safe pretty much from the marauders. And if they failed to pay, then they're gonna have to pay another way. He's going to come after them, isn't he? And so after 12 years, the kings of the 5 cities in the Jordan Valley, the kings of Sodom, the kings of Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar, they say, well, the extortion is over. We're not going to pay this guy anymore. And we're going to quit paying him, and we're just going to take care of things ourselves, and we don't have anything to worry about. But they did have something to worry about because Big C did not like that. And so in verses 5 through 11, we see in detail all these areas now being conquered by Chedorlaomer, Big C. All this detail is here for 2 reasons. And a lot of names and a lot of detail there. And it's there for really a couple reasons. First of all, it illustrates the power of his army. He's pretty powerful. He can take over a big area and a lot of people. And it gathered kind of some momentum by the time they get to the cities in the Jordan River Valley. So he has a powerful army. Secondly, the area conquered by Big C corresponds rather closely to the land that God has promised Abram. And so he's taken over this land, and God has promised that to Abram. An important theological point, maybe, as we study through how this relates to the Lord's covenant with the patriarch. And Big C now dominates Abram's land, but Abram doesn't seem all that bothered. We don't really read about him saying, oh, this is a problem. He knows that someday God's going to give this area to his descendants. He's not really worried about that. He's not upset about that. He knows God's going to take care of this in the future. But something happened. He didn't involve himself until who is taken? Lot. So his nephew is taken, his brother's son is taken, and so now he's going to get involved. Lot, along with his household, along with his possessions, fortunately, someone broke away and has come over to where Abram is and let him know what's going on. This is what happened, okay? He didn't watch it on the news or anything like that. Someone has come over there and told him, hey, Big C is taking all these people, and he's taken Lot and his family and his possessions. Any questions so far or comments so far? All right, we got to keep reading. Let's pick up with verse 13. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Anor, and they were allies with Abram. Now when Abram heard that his brothers was taken, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his own house and went in pursuit as far as Dan. He divided his forces against them by night, and he and his servants attacked them and pursued them as far as Hobah. That'd be a good shoe company name if you ever want to start one. Hobah might be a good name, which is north of Damascus. So he brought back all the goods and also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shavah, that is the king's valley, after his return from the defeat of Big C and the kings who were with him. And so you remember, and you've studied already, Lot decides to go down near Sodom. It looked like a pretty good place. It was probably a beautiful place. It was probably a very productive place to be for all his flocks and anything else. It was probably very nice. And so we see no petty response, though, from Abram when Lot is taken, though, do we? Great people do not judge others for having needs, even troubles they brought upon themselves. Great people see things like this as a call to action, not a time just to sit back and go, oh, poor Lot. He's going to take some action. He's going to do something about all of this. So Abram rallies his 318 trained fighting men from his camp, and they had to fight for themselves. And so they fashioned some weapons, and they got ready to go. And the military people in the room might say they mobilized. They got everything together and mobilized. The men marched north for about 100 miles to the Phoenician city of Laish. The city has guarded a major trade route between Damascus and Tyre, and there was therefore an important place. Big C's army must have felt safe. They had humiliated all these different kings who had decided they weren't going to pay the protection money anymore, and so they had routed them, and so they never suspected a nighttime raid. But Abram didn't have a large force, but he had cunning. Verse 15, we notice he takes his army, divides them, and attacks from different directions at these people. All at once, he creates panic and confusion, and the 318 men rout what possibly might be thousands of men. We don't know how many Big C had, but he had a lot of people. He had a big, strong force, and they sent them running. They chased them some 50 miles to the mountains past Damascus. And they get everything back, it looks like, doesn't it? Looks like they get everything back. Any questions or comments there in verses 13 through 17? Anything that you're noticing or thinking about? Must be good fighters. They must be good fighters. Yeah, he trained them, didn't he? They're trained men. They're working together. All right, pick up with verse 18. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God Most High. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him a tithe of all. Now the king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the persons and take the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand to the Lord, God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take nothing from a thread to a sandal strap, and that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich, except only what the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their possession. So the king of Sodom travels to where Abram is and starts talking to him. And he is going to escort the citizens all the way back home. He comes out to greet the returning hero. And so, I don't know, did they have a big parade? You know, here's everybody going down through here, but they're all going together down through here. Melchizedek's name means king of righteousness. He was a priest of God Most High, verse 18. As a priestly act, he brings bread and wine and serves it as a blessing. So he's a priest of the Most High. He's a priest of God. So what time period are we talking about here? You know, there's 3 time periods, major dispensations. Which one are we talking about? Patriarchal. Okay, so we're talking about the first one. The first one. And the first one began at the beginning and lasted till when? Okay. For the Jewish people in the world, it lasted until the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were organized there at Mount Sinai, and that law, the law of Moses, began. But for everybody else, the patriarchal age kept going on clear up to when Christ folded everybody into following him and following and having the church, right? And so we have no indication that Abram and Melchizedek had ever met each other before. We don't know if they've ever seen each other before. Abram was not a citizen of any city. He certainly didn't need protection from any king. No law of God demanded that he give a gift to Melchizedek. Nevertheless, he gives him 1/10 of the recovered spoils. He gave this offering not so much to the king, but really he's given it to God. Melchizedek is the priest of God, so he's going to give it to the priest who works for God. And so that's how we do it today, right? How do you give your money to God? Here you go, God. You don't leave it out on your step or something, for him to pick up. You work through the organization. So he gives a 1/10. He gives his offering, and this was an act of a modest man who gave credit to the Lord. Any questions or things there you want to ask about? Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. They're just giving us a little bit more information there, aren't they? Yeah, about different things, aren't they? Yeah. Let's talk about Abram a little bit. And maybe you can give me an example of some of these characteristics of Abram as we go through these things here. There's qualities that we can emulate from Abram today, can't we? He's unselfish. Unselfish people in this world hold things very loosely. They're not out there squeezing the life out of their possessions or squeezing the life out of their relationships or being obsessive about them. They have a desire to share. They have a desire to be generous, an ability to discern what is needed and to give. Abram was certainly unselfish. Do you know of anybody, or can you give an example of somebody who might be unselfish? Anybody you can think of? Okay, keep looking at the list. Maybe you'll think of somebody else. How about self-sacrifice? He was self-sacrificing. A willingness to sacrifice their own wants, their needs, comfort for the sake of others. Kind of sounds like a mother, doesn't it? Great people do not allow their personal prejudices or their judgments to keep them from seeking the highest good of other people. They sacrifice for other people, and Abram certainly was self-sacrificing as he went out there to help his nephew. Can you think of anybody that's self-sacrificing besides a mother? I gave you one of them. Okay, Jesus. That's always the answer in Bible class, right? When you don't know the answer, Jesus or God, right? No, that's a good one. I'm just joking with you. Jesus was self-sacrificing, wasn't he? He came down here. First, he becomes a human. And we don't think that's so bad. I mean, we're used to the smell, and we understand what it's like to live here on the earth. But can you imagine the God of heaven coming down and becoming a human? It had a hand in the back. Somebody back there had their hand up. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yes, God said he was testing Abraham, wasn't he? And he said, I want you, here is the son that is the son of promise. You haven't got to this one yet, so I'm not spoiling anything, but you'll get to this one. This is your son, and he's the promise, and through him, all the world's, through his seed and all this stuff, all the world's going to be blessed, and he's going to be the one through all this stuff is going to be happening. And then he's like, go out and kill your son. Sacrifice him to me. And you'll be talking about how Abram kind of was putting his son above God, and that was probably part of the problem, wasn't it? But he was going to do it. I mean, he has it in his hand. He's about to do it. He's about to kill him. What else you could think of it self-sacrificing? How about absence of greed? Collecting more possessions or acquiring more wealth for its own sake makes no sense to him. He doesn't need anything else. God has blessed him so much. Great people don't have a narcissistic tendency. They seek the benefit of others. They use their wealth as a tool to accomplish the greater good. And so he's not all about enriching himself. He's rich. He's got a lot. He doesn't own any land yet, but his descendants are going to have all the land. Can you think of anybody that you're thinking of that maybe absence of greed? Or David, okay. And what's the example with David?
Well, I'm thinking of when he paid for the land and ended up becoming the temple.
Okay, he comes along and he wants to sacrifice to God. And he says, I want to buy this from you. And the guy says, oh, you can have it. You can have it, right? You can have all this for free. And he's, no, I'm not going to offer to God that which costs me nothing. Is that the one you're thinking about? Okay. I just got to thinking maybe I'm thinking of the wrong one. And so I'm not going to give to God that which costs me nothing. And so it's an absence of greed. He's not going to just take something from this person. How about somebody who's greedy? We can maybe think of the bad person that's greedy. Ahab, Nabal, Judas. We can think of greedy people, can't we? Gentleness is a characteristic of Abram. Gentle people control themselves rather than attempting to gain control of other people. Even with authority and influence, they don't play king of the mountain, okay? They are very gentle with other people. Jesus, of course, would be the perfect answer here again. Can you think of anybody else maybe that's gentle, that was gentle as they dealt with people? Okay, yeah. I think it's the Thessalonians. Yes, he is. He goes into Thessalonica and he's trying to teach these people and he's not there very long before he's kicked out of town, and then he sends back Timothy. 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. They talk to him. He finds out what they're confused about, and he gently talks to them. In fact, that book is so different. 1 Thessalonians is different because it just doesn't hit you with a bunch of theological things right away, but it deals with a lot of relationships as you begin that book. And so I think he's very gentle with them. Humility. Abram had a great quality of humility, and though he was incredibly rich and impressively powerful and was even called by God, my friend, Isaiah 48:1, he never became overly impressed with himself. He acknowledged his own failings and helped others overcome theirs. He dealt righteously with unrighteous people. Can you think of anybody maybe who was humble? Of course, again, Jesus is the answer, but yes, ma'am. David, okay. Can you think of what specific thing are you thinking about with David? Okay, Joseph. That's all right. All these names run together sometimes. Moses is written up about being a humble person. He doesn't think he's a very good speaker, although there are some verses talking about his ability to speak. He doesn't think too much of himself. So all of these qualities are things that we can work on that Abram developed in his life. We're not going to say that he had them all at the beginning, but as he lived throughout his life, certainly we see these things growing and becoming more and more a part of who he is. Any questions or comments about that? I still got 20 minutes left. Okay, let's talk about Melchizedek. Let's go, first of all, to Hebrews chapter 7. After I studied that, I said, that's not going to take me the whole time. Hebrews chapter 7 also, and then we'll notice Psalm here in a minute, but Hebrews chapter 7 also talks about this priest. Okay, the book of Hebrews was written to Jewish Christians, right? So they used to be Jewish people. They're still Jewish people by birth, but they're become Christians. And so the whole book tells them, don't give up. Don't quit. Don't go back to your Jewish roots. We know your mother-in-law is messing with you. We know that your old friends are fussing at you, trying to get you to leave Christianity and come back into Judaism. And then he starts giving the reasons why they shouldn't give back. And he gives them the reasons is that Jesus is better. So if you just write down Jesus is better, now you know all about it. You have to know about the book of Hebrews. Jesus is better, right? So he's better than the angels. He's better than Moses. He's a better high priest. He has better promises. He has a better covenant, a better hope, better access to God, better sacrifice, which leads to a better home someday. And so he goes through all of these things. But he's also better than the patriarchal people, okay? Yes, he's better than the priesthood of Aaron, but he's also better than what the non-Hebrews had. And so he tells us a little bit about Melchizedek because he is a type, antitype. He's a type of Christ. And there's some things about him that are also true of the Christ, although Christ is better. Okay, chapter 7, 1 and 2. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High, who met Abram returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abram gave a tenth part of all, first being translated king of righteousness, and then also king of Salem, meaning king of peace. Abram was inferior to Melchizedek. We know that because he gives tithes, he gives money to him, he gives him the spoils to him. Look at chapter 8, verse 1. Now, this is the main point of the things we're saying, okay? You read all through chapter 7, and then you get to chapter 8. Now, this is the main point of the things we're saying. We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord erected and not man. And so he makes the argument that Christ is greater than Melchizedek. And these people would remember from their Bible readings about Melchizedek, the Hebrew people that he's writing to would have heard about them before. They're maybe not connected, that the Jesus they knew was the one who was the fulfillment, and he is greater than all of this. Hebrews 7 and verse 12 kind of summarizes some of these things there. For the priesthood being changed of necessity, there's also a change of the law. And so there's something new. Some of the world had a law under Moses. Some of the people had a law under God. But now everything's new, and there's a new covenant. Melchizedek, now he's the only priest that we know about for sure by name under that patriarchal time. But there's some people who think maybe Job possibly was a priest of God. There's some people who will tell you that Jethro, not the one from Beverly Hillbillies, but the Jethro who is Moses' father-in-law, was also such a priest. And so we don't know that for sure. But that's just what some people say. And there's one other place we find out about Melchizedek, and that is Psalm 110. And verse 4, the Lord has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. And so this Melchizedek is kind of a man of mystery here a little bit. Chapter 7, verse 3. Without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of Man, remains a priest continually. To be a priest under the Jewish law, you had to be a descendant of who? Aaron, right? So you had to be a descendant of Aaron. You had to be the tribe of Levi, right? But evidently, there was no tribal connection for the patriarchal age. And so he's not part of that. Melchizedek was even before the priesthood of Aaron. There's no genealogical requirement. And so it's a novel idea for these people, these Jewish people reading this. Melchizedek had neither father nor mother in the priesthood. That's why he's speaking of being without father. He had a father. He was human. He lived and died, okay. It's not like he lived forever, but he's the first priest that we have mentioned in the Old Testament, but he's not the Christ, verse 3. He's made like the Son of God, but is not the Son of God. And since Melchizedek had no record of ancestors, he would serve as a type of priesthood for our Lord. Now, Jesus was the tribe of what? Judah. And could he have been a priest under the Mosaical law? No. And so, Melchizedek, he wasn't under Levite restrictions. And to be the high priest now, Jesus, he's not under restrictions like the people were under that. And so he kind of talks about that a little bit. And think about the word continually in chapter 7, verse 3. And think about the word forever in chapter 7, verse 17. So Melchizedek was this priest continually. He was a priest forever. These words mean throughout the period of which the term is applied. So how long did people under the patriarchal age, how long were they priests? There you go. We don't know, do we? It wasn't like a 5-year term or a 10-year term. It was probably until they died, or at least got to where they couldn't do it anymore. So throughout the period at which the term of office is applied, they're going to be a priest. Melchizedek, being a man, did eventually die. And so it's said that his priesthood is continually or forever because he doesn't have a 5-year term or a 10-year term. We have governors that are restricted by terms and such. We even have Congress people, they're 2-term limits, but then they get back in and keep going and such forth. And so he didn't reign just for 5 years or 10 years, a set period. His term was forever until it ended. Jesus, being God, his priesthood is similar because his goes on continually or forever. And what makes that even more true is that even though he died, he is now alive. And so he's just making a contrast. Melchizedek is said to be forever or continually. Jesus' term is the same as that. Verses 4 through 8 kind of talks about how Melchizedek is greater than Abraham. Verses 8 through 10, again, talk a lot about how he is a priest forever. And so I'm not going to get into all that. I'm going to let you read that for yourself. The real point, I think, of Hebrews 7, and as we look at Melchizedek and try to figure him out a little bit, the real point of this section is that Christ, his priesthood, his kingship, his role to bringing mankind to God and becoming a blessing was promised long ago. And I think all of this, like chapter 8, verse 1 tells us, Jesus is better. Jesus is better than the angels. He's better than Moses. He's better than the high priest. He has better promises, a better covenant, a better hope, better access to God, better sacrifice, which leads us to a better home someday. And yes, he's even better than Melchizedek. And we need this compassionate Savior just as much as those in the first century did, as Hebrews is written to. Our God cares. He provides sunshine and rain, bountiful harvest, and all the pleasures of his creation, and even more than that. And we can view the problems and the heartaches of this life now with a different spirit because of our great high priest who lives forever. We can see beyond this world to eternity and know that our afflictions are light and fleeting in comparison to what the Lord has for us. And so we started out tonight in Genesis chapter 14, and we looked at a bunch of fighting going on and Abram getting involved because Lot was taken. And we also noticed the characteristics of Abram, characteristics that we can work on and become better at. And then we noticed, because Melchizedek is mentioned, about Christ and how he is our high priest now. We're no longer under the Mosaical or patriarchal, we're under the Christian age. And certainly this rescue could be looked at as, we could even take it and say, we have been rescued, right? We have been rescued from punishment for our sin. Jesus has taken upon himself the penalty for our sin. If we will accept that grace and come to him in faith, we too can be rescued today. Comments, questions? Yes, sir.
Why do you think he gave a tenth to Melchizedek? Is it Thanksgiving for a lot of rescue?
I think he wanted to give to God something. And so it was either what they normally would give, or that's just what he felt like giving. We don't really know the answer to that, okay? Sorry. The guy comes in and says, we don't know the answer to that. But for either that was the customary gift to God, a tenth, even before the law of Moses, or that's just what he thought would be a good thing to give to God. I'm going to give him a tenth of all this that I got back from Big C and all these guys who took all this from these people. Good question, though. Good question. I just wish I don't have a verse to tell you exactly why. Anything else? Thank you all very much. I've given you 7 minutes. You're out 7 minutes early. Thank you all.
Thank you, Judge. We're dismissed.